reason why I wish they would just sell the watches separately. Anyways, I got to ask you about the stainless steel, but my other question was actually not about that. It was about your 14-inch MacBook Pro. A lot has changed over the last week. I'm sort of thinking about this. I still don't have my computer yet. Maybe next week, we'll see. But I guess two questions. One is, are you keeping that laptop now after you've played with it for a week? And also, do you have any regrets? Because from what I've seen, there is ever so slightly some performance improvements with the 16-inch over the 14-inch. So kind of what are your thoughts 1 week later?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts 1 week later are I still love this computer. It is excellent. It is the fastest laptop I've ever had, even though it is the base model 10-core 14-inch. So the 16-inch Intel computer that I have, which is sitting right here, I'm still using it for a lot of stuff because it's so optimized for all the little programs and stuff that I definitely am forgetting if I just switch over to it. But comparing it, because I kind of went back to back editing video in Final Cut Pro with both the 16-inch and the 14-inch, which is back in my eyesight. So I'm like looking beyond the camera. But let me put it this way. So my 16-inch is a Core i9. I believe it is a top model CPU at the time that it was available, but it had the mid-range GPU, which I think is the same computer you have.
I think so. I think we have the same spec.
Yeah. Which basically means it's a very powerful computer. It could be a little faster on the graphics, but in terms of processing and everything, it's about as good as you can get. This 10-core M1 Pro, so not the Max, the M1 Pro on the 14-inch laptop destroys it. Like it's not even a comparison really when it comes to Final Cut Pro, which is basically what we do. Like that, it's funny. There's always, every time there's like a new laptop that comes out and all the reviews come out, they always compare it to Final Cut Pro and like how that performance is. And everyone, or not everyone, but like in the comments, you often see people complaining like, well, what about all these other tasks? Why do you always just do video editing? Well, it's like, well, we make videos for a living. So this is this is the easiest way to compare it. Sure, you might not be making videos, but video editing is often a very intensive task that really challenges the CPU. But this 14-inch base model, like I said, for the M1 Pro, at least for the 10-core, is excellent. Works really well. Now, there's a few things that really go into that. So the videos that we shoot are often ProRes. So these chips have ProRes acceleration natively built in. It's almost like the, what is it called for the Mac Pro? The Afterburner. It's basically built into this computer at this point. So that I think I'm definitely noticing. The other thing though is the video that you're watching right now for this podcast is actually using the Canon R6. Now that is notorious because it uses the H.265 encoding. And basically these Intel computers don't have decoding for that. So your computer's just chugging along for what are basic, like they're really small files in the grand scheme of things. They're pretty lightweight in terms of like what the footage actually is, but these Intel computers just can't handle it. Apple Silicon has that built in. I remember when like the EOS R5 first came out, which is from Canon. That was maybe like 6 months, maybe a year ago at this point now. Jeez, time's flying. But anyway, there was so many people complaining that you can't really edit this on Mac computers, but then you can import it to your iPad and it would just like butter cut through it. And that's because of Apple's, it has support for H.265. So those two things just instantly make it better for editing. But even just beyond that, like the rendering times, the processing times, all of that stuff has been significantly faster, not to mention just using the computer. It's been great. I really like it. Now, to the other question, will I be keeping this particular model? I'm sticking with the 14-inch. I went to the Apple Store over the weekend and played around with the 16-inch just to see what the feel was like, because we've said this before in past episodes, but we have the 16-inch now, and it is definitely a chunky boy. Like, man, I hate traveling with it. And granted, we're not doing nearly as much travel as we used to, but I mean, hopefully in the future we'll be able to travel more. The 14-inch is the way to go for me. Any minor gains that might be there in our workflow and my workflow just does not seem worth it. I'm all in on this 14-inch, but I do think I'm going to have to get an M1 Max. I want that power. There were 2 times that I can remember where I did get a beach ball for like 5 seconds and then it went away. And that happened twice. My other computer, my Intel 16-inch, that happens pretty often, actually. So it's definitely better, but it's not perfect. So I want that max. I don't know if I'm going to go to the full 64 core GPU or anything or 64, 32 core. I can't remember. These numbers always get mixed up in my head. Yeah, M1 Max has 32 core GPU, but 64 gigs of RAM. I think that's what it is. I don't know if I'm going to go quite that far, but I'm definitely going to get the M1 Max because I want that power.
What's so crazy about this, too, is that we're now at the point where the new MacBook Pros are being compared to the Mac Pros, and they're beating the Mac Pros, which is just mind-boggling. I remember not that long ago when that Mac Pro came out, and it looks beautiful, and it's quiet, and it's powerful, and now for a fraction of the price, you could get a computer that sort of beats it in a lot of ways, which is just absolutely crazy. So I am chomping at the bits to finally get away from this Intel machine and finally try this computer. Hopefully, maybe next week. UPS is sort of in limbo. It popped up that it's coming, but now they don't know when it's coming. So we'll see. But it's been really interesting to see sort of the differences between 14 and 16, because it seems like the 16 has a slight advantage, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like enough to quantify the move up. And I don't know. I think that if you have a 14-inch, I don't know if it really means you need to go return it and go get a 16. I have seen multiple people return their 14s for the 16s, but I don't know. Do you think that's really worth it? I think we're sort of splitting hairs at this point.
I'll say this, and this is for a lot of people maybe a controversial sentence, but if you're making YouTube videos, which a lot of the people that we are seeing do this, like return process and like get the 16-inch, if you're making YouTube videos, even if you're shooting on red like Marquez, you'll be fine with the 14-inch.
I think there's definitely every episode we talk about the Twitter tech echo chamber. It's so easy to get this FOMO of like, oh my gosh, I need to have the 16. I need this and I need that. Give it like a month, and then all this will like settle, and the dust will settle, and you can just be happy with what you want. I would get what you want and what works with your workflow, not get the maxed out, 16-inch with 64 gigs of RAM because it's going to be better in like one benchmark. I would just, go with what you want and be happy with it, because they're all, at the end of the day, crazy powerful. And like you said, depending on your task, you probably don't need or would even notice that difference.
Right. And then I think the other buying decision that you always have to keep in mind is buy what you can afford. Yeah. I mean, these computers are not cheap by any means, so maybe you don't need that 8 terabyte SSD. Like, you'll be fine. Like, you can use external storage. You can get a 2 terabyte. We've been living with 2 terabytes and like a terabyte for years. Not having 8 terabytes is not going to destroy you. So buy what you can afford. If you can afford that 8 terabyte, go for it. If you can't, don't feel bad. You're still getting a great computer. Hey, you made it to the end of this Apple Circle podcast clip, but there is a full episode. So if you want to listen to that, click the video over here. You can watch the entire thing. Or if you're someone who just wants to listen in your headphones, we have the audio version, of course. Links for that, where you can subscribe and listen in your favorite audio podcast player, is down below. And last but not least, the Apple Circle channel, where we have many videos covering everything Apple, is also linked down below. So be sure to check that out and get subscribed.